the island. So I also work with Lauren and Gary. I oversee not just Lauren's areas, but 9 areas in total of our recreation department, which includes our fitness center, our tennis center. We also have a pool scape, we have our beach scape, and we also do a lot of group sales and events, which we build contracts and set up events for. So we do a lot of different things. I don't know if anyone knows about our resort, obviously through Gary, but there's a ton that we do here, and we have over 1,300 acres of just lots and lots of recreation.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, Shane, welcome to the hotline and thank you for being a special guest this evening. And as you've all heard, our three guests are professionals within hospitality and recreation, excited to share their best practices with us today. Now, how the conversations are going to flow are very simple. We'll be able to share the question, and I'll tag on a speaker or two to share their insights. Not every speaker will answer every question, but we'll be sure to kind of navigate through each and every speaker to ensure we get all of your best practices. So to kick it off, ladies and gentlemen, we're starting our hotline off strong. We're going to talk about building a culture of success, right? So developing those strong teams from within. And as you know, teams within recreation are made up of many different personalities, many different roles in between, and it's very difficult to truly get to that culture of success sometimes. People can say, hey, we want a good culture, but what is a good culture in the first place, right? So, Andrew, I'll poke on you first as our president elect. Talk to us a little bit about some strategies and best practices you implement when developing that quote unquote strong culture within your teams.
Well, I think there's a couple different avenues you can take, but when I first come into a team, the first thing that I really like to do is I would like to get to know my team, right? You can't just come in and start, telling them what to do and how to do it. You really got to get to know them to get them to buy in. So one of the things that I do kind of right off the bat is I implement, one-on-ones where within the first couple months I'll meet with each individual associate and talk to them, just get to know them. What are their goals and aspirations? That way too, it shows that my interest in them and their development, and that's how you're initially start that buy-in process. The next thing that as you start to get to know them and start to get to get into the operation a little bit, you do need to hold boundaries, and in order to be successful and in order to get to that level of success that you want and have a good culture, you need to have people that hold certain standards, and you need to get them each associate to hold each other to those standards. So that's really important, is that I can't be the one all the time to go to my team and say, hey, you're doing this wrong. You need to have them hold each other accountable, because then that's going to build that culture of success and say, hey, oh, we're not up to that standard. Somebody's going to get on me today. What? I got to raise my level a little bit. So those are a couple of the easy things that I do when I first come into a team, to really, kind of elevate that standard a little bit, and to really kind of start creating a good culture and a place where people really want to be.
Awesome. Yeah. Nice. Now, I do want to shift over towards Shane. But Shane, for you, similar question, but more so very specific. What does a high performing team look like to you when there is a good culture in place?
Honestly, I think it really means that everybody is kind of doing what they're supposed to, at a high level. I think once you establish your culture and you build, the team that you've always wanted, or, you got to start from somewhere. So, you may not have the team right away that you first come into, but you have to set the expectations. As Andrew kind of mentioned, you kind of want to set the boundaries and the things that you're looking for to get out of your team. And then it's just best practice. As you continue to do your events and you continue to do your operations, people are going to make mistakes. It's about coaching them through those mistakes and building them up for the future, so that when it does come down to the time that they are possibly going to make those mistakes, they've learned from the past and can work on those. We also want to lead by example. The biggest thing is, if I have high expectations and I expect something to be done
Pasta
at a high
Mariana.
level, then I also want to be able to showcase as to why and how we do that. I'm not going to do something that, or ask my team to do something that I don't expect myself to do as well. So, putting myself in those situations and actually working hard and rolling up my sleeves to show them what I expect, or what we expect as a culture.
Yes, that's amazing, Shane. Now, thank you both very much. And Lauren, I'm going to throw you a curveball here. So let's say Andrew's your director, Shane's the assistant director, and we just heard from them about the vision on developing that strong culture. But you, as a recreation manager, you have to go push it out to the team, right? So talk to us a little bit about how in your current role you hear the vision from above, you understand that you want to develop accountability through the culture of success, but what does it look like in operations being able to hold the team accountable and ensure the team does become that high performing team?
Yeah, I think understanding the why we do the things we do is important. I think showing that we're a luxury brand at the Omni, relaying that to the team of this is why we all have to wear uniforms or polos while we're out on the beach doing a shark tooth discovery or doing tours that you wouldn't normally expect luxury in. I think them understanding why we do what we do and holding them to those standards, like Shane said, being out there with the team and leading by example is very important to me. I think them seeing their leader doing the things that they're asked to, it's not like, oh, I have to do this. They're like, oh, Lauren's out here doing it with us. If she can do it, I can do it too. And it really motivates them to be better. And maintain those standards. And also, it's a good reminder of being out there with them is a good way to remind them of what those standards look like on a consistent basis.
Yeah, amazing. Awesome. Thank you all so much for tackling that first section. Andrew, I see you have your hand, so please chime on in.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback on something Shane said because I really like resonated with it, and you can't have your team be afraid to fail. Like if they are afraid to fail, then they're going to be uptight and way much more like that. So if you come in with an attitude of coaching and an attitude of hey, it's okay to fail, but we're going to make it better the next time. That really kind of helps create that next level. And I want to say thank you for bringing that up. That's a really good something that people can take back to their teams. Don't be afraid to fail. Try something new. And if you
Oh, yeah.
fail, what do you learn from it?
Oh, yes, indeed. Now, throughout all of your answers, it's very obvious that a culture of success starts from the top, right? Leadership is very important to be able to set the tone, set the vision, and be able to be the example. So, talking about leadership, and Shane, we'll start with you for this case scenario. I want to learn more about what do you all think is the most important leadership principles when guiding a department at large?
A few things run through my head. I think honesty and integrity is one. To be able to run an efficient team, you guys have to be honest and upfront with each other. The second that you start hiding things and keeping things away from the team, it creates a bad culture for the team, not only just for yourself, but for the teammates that are working together. Um, I think an all-in mentality. Omni kind of embraces that kind of culture. We say it all the time, we're all in, but we truly embrace it here. We want our teammates, not just from our team, but from other departments as well, to kind of have a buy-in. We're here to service one thing, and that's our guests. If our guests can have that full experience, no matter what it looks like, it starts from the front desk. If the front desk starts talking to the guests and then they figure out, hey, this person wants a kayak tour. And then we start working out the details and then we find out it's their anniversary. And then, we kind of go all in on making sure that this one guest has this amazing experience. So if we're all in on that mentality, then we can really accomplish anything. And I think just a formidable, um, like a strong foundation. I think it really does start not just from leadership, but from the people that are there working with you every single day. These are the people that are out there sweating, they're in the heat, they're in the sun, making sure that those people are, kind of their motivation is up, their energy is up, they're given the tools that they need to be successful. And then they would want other people to want to buy into that and then join them as part of their team. So that helps with recruiting, that helps with people motivating them throughout the job while they're here, retention. So I think having that strong core of associates or teammates that you have that you can rely on will help just set the tone for the rest of the team.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much for sharing. Now, Lauren, would love to shift over to yourself. when it comes to just leadership principles overall, which principles stand out to you as the most important when leading a team?
I think it really depends on your associates. I really like I know it's kind of cheesy to say, but having the family culture and feeling like a family, it's really important to me. Being empathetic to your associates and their situations. I think being respectable to them, like I said, hardworking and dedicated. I think being passionate also goes a long way for your associates. Having a positive attitude, those things kind of rub off onto your associates when they see you having a good time, when they see you being passionate about something, they really start to get into it and they kind of develop that passion for things as well. Um, I think those are my big ones.
Yeah, awesome. No, thank you so much for sharing. Now, as we talk about leadership principles, it's obvious that throughout our industry at large, recreation, we're the fun department, right? And everyone is expected to have a good time, to bring the energy each and every day, walk with a smile on your face. And as we all know, sometimes that can be exhausting, right? So, on the leadership standpoint, still, how do you all help keep your teams motivated, whether it's a seasonal team or a full year round team, after, let's say, 2 weeks of back to back to back high occupancy? So, any of the three of you guys can chime in on this question, but we want to learn more about how to keep those teams energized through the hard times.
My teams love food. I think just taking them one on one, even or after some of our large group events, like Shane said, after we have a big group kayak, taking them over to our pizza shop has a frozen yogurt stand in there. So taking them over to all go get some frozen yogurt after a big kayak tour out in the heat is a great way to motivate them.
Oh, yeah. You can never go wrong with food. I think that's so important. Andrew or Shane, would you like to chime in on this question as well?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that comes to mind for me is, I mean, it's simple, right? It's just verbal acknowledgement. When you go and you have these teams that are working so hard, it sometimes it can really mean the world to an associate. Like if they're dragging to be like, "Hey, keep it up. You're doing a good job." Like, "Hey, we're in this together." If you jump in right next to them, say, "Hey, how can I assist?" Like those are the types of things that really can elevate a team, and like it comes back to being in there with them and not being afraid to do their jobs with them as well. Um, but I think a lot of it is bringing the energy on a daily basis. You got to bring the energy, and you got to lead from the front, as Shane said earlier, and you have to, even if you're having a bad day or if you can't let your team see what's going on behind the scenes. So you really have to pull that curtain down and jump out there in front of your team and really give them the best part of you every time.
Agree. Yes, I think that's so important. And funny enough, I have a funny note to add there. I typically say, hey, 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 all the time. So my team has a insider joke on they can grade how I'm feeling based on how many hays I say. So they're like, if Justin ever says, hey, how are you? Be careful. He must not be happy, even though I never just say one hey. But exactly to your point, being able to be that example, bring the energy each and every time. Teams are at first going to say, how do you do this every single day? Right. And then that's when you'll be able to share some more insights with them. Now, what I love most about REC Net Hotlines is not just hearing your specific answers to the question, but more so really being able to get true insight from different leaders across the nation, right? And more so for the next half of this question, I do want to talk a little bit more about some challenges you guys face, but more so the lessons that you've learned that help you transition as a leader. So to be specific, the next question that we have is, what was one leadership lesson that you believe fundamentally changed the way you lead? So I would like to throw this ball over towards Lauren. You'll go first here. Good luck. But tell us about that leadership lesson that you feel like changed the way you lead.
I would say learning to delegate and learning to let go. I started out here as a naturalist. And being on those front lines and working your way up, I feel like you really have a way that you like to do it and a very it feels like almost like I always call it my baby. I feel like I've built this team. I've built this department or my nature center and my wheels department to what it is today. So delegating and letting go of the reins a little can be a little tough for me. But having a strong team and teaching them and training them to those high standards has really helped and takes a big burden off of you as a leader, being able to let go a little and trusting your team because you've trained them well.
Yes, I think that is so important. And thank you very much for sharing that. Now, Andrew, would you like to chime in on the lesson that you believe has helped change the way you lead?
Yeah, I mean, I can actually I can name the specific. So I was back working with the city of Westminster out in Colorado, and I was a young assistant supervisor, really coming into my first real management role, like with a large facility, and I had about 10 people underneath me, and I was having a tough time. So I reached out to our director of Parks and Recreation, and he was about what 5 levels ahead of me at that point, but he had always told us, hey, reach out to me. I'll grab you lunch. I'll buy you lunch. And so he met me for lunch. And it was one of those, that right there meant so much to me as a young leader that said, hey, I need to take time for those people that are up and coming right now because they're the next generation. And he took the time for me. And during that lunch, um, he sat me down and we were talking through a few things and he was like the most important lesson that I've ever learned is every team you have about 90% of them that are like good to above average employees, some great, and every team has about 10%. And he was like, don't focus 90% of your energy on the 10% of the people that you're trying to make better. Focus 90% of your energy on the 90% of the people that are there and want to learn and be better. Those 10%, if you hold these ones to this high standard, they will weed themselves out. And so that way you are then putting your energy into something that's meaningful and trying not to pull people that are, I hate to say dead weight, but that's kind of what they're going to weed themselves out because they're not buying in. And you need to create that culture with and focus on those 90% of the people that want to be there and want to learn and make your place better.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. That is very great insight. Now, Shane, you seem pretty engaged with this question, so we would love to hear your insight on this leadership lesson you believe has helped change the game for you.
Yeah. I think Andrew and Lauren both hit the nail on the head with everything that they mentioned. Little background for me is I came into this role and outside in. I had never worked in hospitality before. I was in Parks and Rec as a lifeguard, then a supervisor and an assistant manager, and kind of helped facilitate within the city of Boca Raton for a little bit. And then I came into 9 departments and um, thousands of guests and 402 hotel rooms and 1,300 acres, and my mind was blown. I think when I first got here, I had to learn so much so fast. And I think one of the biggest things that I've taken away from my leadership skills here, at least, is you're never going to stop learning. You're never going to be an expert in anything. So you're always need to take your time, learn something, try to figure it out. You will fail. It's okay to fail. And that's one of the things that makes you a better leader at the end of the day is to keep going through the motions and try to figure out the best solutions so that for next time what to do. I know I mentioned it earlier, but I really think that resonates with me is just owning your failures. And I came from a past where I always wanting to be perfect and try to figure things out. If I don't, then I'm going to fail and I'm, gonna, not make it. But you get into this environment and you realize that not everything is perfect. We call it organized chaos here, and we strive on it because it's true. You try to make the best of the situation. But I think it's just one of those things is you have to accept what you're given on any given day and roll with the punches. And like Andrew mentioned earlier, it's your positive attitude. How you go about your day can really resonate with the team and create a completely different environment from the top down. If you go in there with a sulking face, then they will too. You got to have that energy all the time. And I've had my days where I've walked in and, didn't want to be there. But, at the end of the day, I know that these people have a job to do and that they want to be there for the guests. So I have to put on that face and do the same thing. All my personal stuff, I, tell to my team as well, leave it at the door when you walk out. And then when you come back, you can deal with it then. But while you're here, you're going to deal with the guests.
Oh yeah, nice. No, thank the three of you very much for sharing your insights on that question, as it is very, very important to know. More so next, we want to shift on a very, very fun and interesting topic, which is programming, right? In recreation management, we have the cool opportunity to really design experiences that will hopefully make a memorable impression on our guests and owners and visitors across the board, right? However, it is very tricky sometimes. So I'm so excited to hear some of the best practices you have when it comes to truly designing experiences. So we'll kick this one off with Andrew, but the question is, what are some best practices that you recommend when designing experiences that can hopefully enhance the guest experience?
I think some of the best things that you can do is asking your team. Um, like the team is the one that's out there with the guests on a daily basis. So they are the ones talking to the guests. And not that, I'm not, but they are in more the nitty gritty. So if they get ideas and they hear suggestions from them, like I want to hear from them. So one of the things that I did, like beginning of every year, I sat down with during the one-on-one sessions with my associates. I gave them goals and I gave them, okay, what are your ideas? Get list out your 3 goals and your 3 ideas for the team this year. And some of them are crazy off the wall, but at the other time, like you can weed through those and be like, hey, there's a grain of something here worth something. And now we take that little piece and you elaborate on it, and then you take it back to the team and you're like, hey, what do we do? And I see Wesley Christie's on this call down here as well. He was one of my people that I talk to consistently, and he talked to me, and we threw ideas off of each other. And you have to be in a room and be able to no holds barred, just throw out crazy ideas, and then somebody's going to take something. And you're like, ooh, that sounds like it could work, and then you weave an idea around that. But once again, it comes back to don't be afraid to fail. Like, you have to try new things. And if the guests don't like it, they don't appreciate it, you can let them know, hey, we were trying something new today. How can we tweak this to make it better? And you put it back on them. Well, what can we do? And I think that's one of the best practices you can do from an entertainment programming standpoint.
Amazing. Now, I do want to shift over to Shane. When it comes to programming overall, let's take it right back to square one. If you're sitting down and you're thinking, all right, new season's coming up, let's begin programming. What does your step one look like to get the ball rolling?
Step one for me is kind of what's realistic. We kind of no, well, I would say no, step one is really to get the ideas flowing. So we are probably going to sit in a room, we're going to go on a whiteboard, we're going to just write down whatever comes to mind. Like Andrew said, he kind of just picks and chooses and kind of lets the team kind of go and throw out some crazy ideas. And then we really kind of got to sift through them and, see what's going to work for us. That's when we go to that next step of what can we do? And you're going to go through the list of what's in our budget, what's our team capable of doing, what equipment do we have, or what equipment do we need to purchase. So there's a lot that's goes involved into just the first part of just getting the idea out there. And then when you actually go through and start the process of, hey, I think we can make this work. Who's going to be responsible for it? How many people are we able to have this participate? If it fails the first time, do we continue doing it? It's kind of you kind of either have to just go with it, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, oh well, we try again. Um, and then, not everything is going to be perfect the first time. There's some events that we have that we kind of just get thrown into that we're going to do for the very first time and possibly the last time. And then there's some events that we take months and maybe even years to plan out. Lauren has something that she's been working on for a while that she, wants to implement for the future. But these are things that we've talked about from day one of getting here. Everyone has a vision and everyone has goals in mind. It's about how you put those into play, and you have to have the right team to actually make it work.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for sharing. Now, I love programming, and as every rec professional, we know we want to get all of our crazy ideas, creative ideas out there to make it happen. And the funnest part of all is we also know that we have to balance the big question on the classic activities that everyone expects, right? We can't launch a brand new program and kick out the activities that everyone knows that should be at that resort. When I came 15 years ago, it was there, right? So, how do the three of you balance those classic activities, but also include some creative, brand new ones that the guests may have never seen?
I'll start.
Cool.
I think you have to have it goes back to that all-in mindset of, I'm a new leader. I'm going to come in. I want to keep the things that have always worked, but there's always something to improve. There's always something to make better. There's always something to bring that's new that can make it better. Um, I think you first have to just take some time and do your research on, what has worked and what hasn't worked. If you have a program where you're only getting one person every day for, that class or that experience, but you want to maximize the amount of people, what is it that we can do differently? Is it gonna work? Do we even keep it? I know this is something that somebody does every year, but is it possible with the budget that we have, with the location that we have? Things change. Our environment at Omni Amelia Island changes a lot, especially with our beaches. We have dunes that shift throughout the years. So there's certain things that we haven't been able to do like what we have in the past. We typically have a volleyball net that we have in the dunes, but we can't actually set it up this year because the dune area is so small. So we kind of have to pivot and figure out what else can we do. So now we can bring out bocce ball and cornhole and different activities. So we're kind of taking what we did and replacing it with something else. So we're not losing that entire experience, but we're just making it a little different. I think when you bring in something new, you also have to have buy-in to your team, like we kind of talked about before. Your team wants to have the support to do it, and then also the motivation to want to do it. We have associates that have been here for 40 plus years that have probably seen the same programs over and over and over again, and they either love them or they hate them. That's just the reality of it. So I think if you're trying to bring in something new, you have to have that team buy-in to be like, yeah, this is great. We're going to do it. And I'm not going to talk about the past. I'm going to move forward and talk about the future.
Amazing. Thank you, Shane, for jumping on in there. Andrew and Lauren, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I was going to say the big thing with that is data. Like, you need to have data. You mentioned one person, so it's really important to keep records of what is working. So that way, if people say, "Hey, this like, why are we getting rid of something so classic?" With last 3 months, we've had 3 people attend. We are going to move on from this classic, offering. So being able to have that to back up is really important. Um, and I think that's the big thing is keeping the data. That's what I want to add to that.
Amazing. Yes. I love that you mentioned data. For the next section, in a few minutes here, I'm going to piggyback more on data and pick your brains on how you track some of that. But overall, when it comes to programming, I do want to pick your brains now on if there's any experiences or trends that you believe should be in the future of programming and you would be excited to see more of throughout resorts, country clubs, etc. So, Lauren, if you want to chime in.
Um, One thing I know, I just talked to Jessica from one of the other Omni properties about e-bikes, just trying some new things that are popular or trendy, seeing how they've worked at other properties and things and seeing if there's something we can bring to ours, if it's sustainable. Some things are a trend, some things I think will work long term. So it's hard to say for me, but just trying new things.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that you mentioned that as when it comes to just programming and finding that new experience in the first place, I always tell my team, let's look at what good looks like, right? And what that means to me is let's take a trip to Universal Resort and see how they host activities, right? We may have the same activity as what we have at our property, but they may do something slightly different that we want to steal. Or let's go to a restaurant And even though it's completely different than resort activities, perhaps the waiter is going to say a spiel that we might be able to recognize. Oh, wait, that was a nice intro. Let's steal it and be able to pull what good looks like from all of these places to implement inside of an activity or experience. Now, next on the list, I do want to talk a little bit about more on the data side, right? So we can talk all about creating culture of success and making sure our guests are happy and the team's happy, but how do we track it? So for best practice purposes, if Shane, you would like to go first and talk to us a little bit about how you have key metrics, but how do you dissect those metrics and retain the data?
So as I mentioned before, I have 9 different areas. So I have different softwares and different data points for every area specifically. And each area we're kind of looking at different things. So at my fitness center, I'm tracking, how many people are actually coming to the fitness center. How many people of those guests or of our members are actually unique or coming for the first time ever. So we're trying to keep track of those numbers as well as we kind of have separate entities. So we have our members, which are a part of the Mill Island Club, and then our resort guests that all utilize. So we're trying to separate that data. It's very clear and easy for us to see it because we use Pacesetter, which is a check-in app, and then we have one group that kind of checks in with that app, and then another group that checks in an entirely different system. I think it's just the way you have to set up your facilities and look at the data that you're looking for. I know with Wheels, we're our Amelia's Wheels, which is our bike rentals and our golf cart services. We're looking ahead to see the trends and to see how many people are actually booking or reserving months out, because that's one of our biggest cash cows is that service. So we want to know, hey, yes, the data before we know like people are renting more golf carts than bikes, whatever it may be, but we want to see ahead. So we want to implement a system that actually books for guests ahead of time to see our data coming in for the future. And then we have other metrics such as our beach and pool services that guests can reserve. They can also leave surveys, so they can actually let us know how their experience was, which helps us a lot kind of determine that other data, kind of gives us some feedback that we may not normally get or hear from the guest. So not only just the numbers, but the ability for our guests to share the information that they want to share with us that they may not get the opportunity to do in person or when they're actually renting the service. So there's a lot of different metrics. I think you just have to have the right software really for what program you're running on, and kind of like pick and choose what data points matter to you the most.
Terrific. And thank you for sharing the names to the softwares you
Yeah.
utilize. So maybe some of our viewers can be able to check in on with that as well.
Yeah. I can share a list as well for all the ones that we have in the chat. And that way you guys can have a list of what we actually utilize for each department.
Amazing. Now, Andrew and Lauren, would you like to chime in on how you retain the data and act on it?
I would like to touch on one of the ones that Shane brought up, our golf cart and bike rental system. So sometimes these systems are a little tricky with the data, but there are workarounds. So with the golf carts and bikes, we can see trends that we do sell out every 4th of July and Easter weekend. So this year we actually implemented holiday, our golf carts, we call them hoppers, but holiday hopper pricing. So we actually have raised our prices for those weekends that we do typically sell out year over year. So I think you can kind of use that data in your favor to even just create a little more revenue for your department.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a lovely example. So thank you for sharing that there. Andrew, I noticed you unmuted. So yes, please chime on in.
Well, I think the type of data that you collect is based on the operation that you're running. A hospitality is going to collect different data than what a Parks and Rec center would traditionally do, or even a community-based programming. You're all going to have different data that's going to collect different things. So it all for when I was with the city of Westminster, one of the things that we were really focusing on was uh, when people were leaving, were they happy? Were they, did they like their stay? Did they have fun in the pool? Did the families have a good time? Did they enjoy their program while they were there? And so we were trying to get real time feedback. So we implemented what was called the happy or not at the time. And it was a very rudimentary, like, you hit the happy face, you see them kind of all over the place. But that gave us some really good data points for in the moment saying, hey, something's wrong now. We could go in at any point during the day and see like a negative spike. We'd get an alert on the phone saying, okay, something's wrong here in the facility. Okay, we need to go check it out. As a leader, we can go then identify the problem right then and there. And that was in the moment data that I really liked and appreciated. But a lot of hospitality places, I mean, you're not going to see that at a lot of hotels or in hospitality. But like at a community event program, I'd say it's worth a looking into to get some of those types of things.
Yeah, that sounds like a really awesome system to be able to right then and there hop in and hopefully, recover the guest experience. Now, as we shift towards one of the final sections, before we open up the hotline for our listeners to be able to chime in and ask our speakers some questions, I do want to head into a very generic ending, which is as leaders, or not as leaders actually, before you were a leader, if there was a lesson or advice that you wish you learned much before you stepped into management that would help you in your career, what would that advice or lesson be? So, more so in simplest terms, as a young professional starting off in recreation, what advice would you give to that person? Let's kick it off with Shane, and then we'll go to the next two.
Hard lesson you have to learn, and just something that you kind of understand as you go along. But somebody's always watching. It doesn't matter if it's your leader, doesn't matter if it's a guest, doesn't matter if it's a teammate. Somebody is always watching, and you just have to know that you always need to hold yourself to a higher standard. Hold yourself accountable. Be honest. Just know that just because you feel like you're alone doesn't mean you're alone. And your actions have consequences. So the things that you do in your everyday, just because you feel like you don't want to do it in that moment, may affect somebody else down the road or for the next shift. And just have to understand that you always just need to be on your A game no matter what.
Amazing. Thank you very much for sharing that. Now, Lauren, let's head over to you.
I would say be open to trying and learning new things. You never know what you will or won't enjoy until you try it. I actually never intended to end up in the recreation world, but here I am 5 years later. And I find new things that are exciting that I end up being passionate about every day. I know it's been brought up multiple times, but don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to push for things that you're passionate about. Even if Gary tells you no, maybe one day you can get alligators.
One day, maybe one day.
It's coming soon.
And Andrew.
I was gonna just to piggyback off that, say yes. Like there's so many amazing opportunities and experiences out there, and you say yes. And I've said yes now a couple different times to some opportunities, and it's led me all over the country. It's led me to RecNet with some amazing professionals in the community. Like by saying yes, you're opening yourselves up and to so much more out there. So don't hold back. Say yes, but be true to yourself, and the good things are going to happen.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. Well, thank the three of you very much for being able to answer all of our questions today. You are all very phenomenal in what you do. And before we head off the call, now is one of my favorite moments. So we are opening up the hotline for our listeners and guests to be able to pick the brains of our guest speakers. So please do not be shy to chime on in and ask a question. All you have to do is raise your hand, or for this sake, you can simply unmute. Dun-dun-dun.
Hi, this is Frank from Strip Iraq. I really like our speakers. I know we have three, but I forgot which one was it. And I would like to echo accepting imperfections, which is really cool. And that's what I do every single day here with students. every individual come with different backgrounds. They got different level of skills. We all respect that. So accepting imperfections, I think that's one of the approaches I take with students. They are learning from the protected environments. However, on the opposite side over there in the industry, if you guys or say your crew make a mistake, I think you may lose your customer or ended up losing money. And to me, that's not acceptable. We try to be prepared any way we can to minimize the risk and maximize the revenue for the operations. Here on the education side, we also intentionally try to set up an environment where students can learn out of the best, just like you guys over here. I also echo what Andrew mentioned, focus on the majority of the team rather than that 10% of, in my words, that's troublemakers. Somehow we have to let them go. Over here at school, we can't. We have to spend, I would say, 90% of the time on those 10% of students. This is totally different. But I'm with you, yes. It's all about choices. If they choose to do it that way, somehow they are digging their own holes for themselves.
Amazing. Thank you very much,
Thank
Frank,
you.
for
Thank
sharing
you.
the insight. It's a pleasure to have you on the call today. Would anyone else like to chime in for the REC Net Hotline? Sally Evans entered a question inside of the chat. So Sally says, how do you lead when everything is constantly changing? So this is a question for our guest speakers. So the three of you all can chime on in. But how do you lead when everything is changing all of the time?
I can add to that first. I think you just kind of have to have a bunch of different things in your back pocket. You got to always be prepared for um, anything, really. I mean, it can be weather, especially, is one of our biggest factors, as everyone knows. So, if we're planning to have 1,000 people on our pool deck and we expect rain, preparation is key. So I think that if we are ready ahead of time, things can run smoothly or look like we were expecting it. We have our luxury of having a large conference center, so we can rent a room if possible and be able to put some activities and some gains in there and be able to pivot on a rainy day. I think it really is, you kind of have to go with the flow. It kind of is never ending with the change. There's days where you kind of don't know what ball you're going to be thrown. So you kind of just have to pivot and adapt very quickly and come up with a solution very, very fast. And it may be the wrong decision, but at least you're going to own it and go with it. And then you talk about it later.
Awesome. Great answer. Thank you very much, Shane.
Yeah, just kind of piggyback off that. Things in hospitality, as we all know, things change. They're crazy. Things can switch on a dime. But as a leader, the main thing that you need to do for your team is stay here. You can't get emotional with the changes. Because if you get emotional with the changes and all of a sudden if something changes and it's not what you expected, and then you go down, then your whole team comes down with you. So regardless of how you feel about the personal change, whether it be from ownership or anything like that, you have to bring that same level of enthusiasm to make sure that your team is buying into those changes. And so you need to set your personal feelings aside as a leader and make sure that the guest experience is the number one thing, that you are stepping out in front of that guest. And this was always the plan. There was never ever a different thing that we were planning on over here. This was the plan the whole time, and the guest shouldn't know any different.
Correct. Very, very, very great perspective there. Lauren.
I would say it really chalks up to what Shane said earlier, controlled chaos. There's some things that we can plan for, but one thing that I did have to learn early on into leading was being decisive. In the moment, your team's kind of looking for you for an answer, just making a decision and sticking with it. And even if it is the wrong decision, like Shane said, you made the decision, just if it didn't work out, you learned a lesson. But being a leader and being there for the team, I think, is important.
Indeed. Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing. Now, Lisa, I noticed that you unmuted, so please chime on into the hotline.
No, my question is, and I know Lauren said one of her challenges in the beginning was to delegate, but what is like one thing that you guys look for when you know it's okay to let go and let someone else take the lead?
I kind of like I said earlier, I think really enforcing a good training schedule with your associates. I really like to teach them, let them do it hands on, and watch them do it. I think being there to watch them do it successfully and seeing them succeed in it is when you kind of know, and you can always kind of build things up. Obviously, don't leave somebody, the first day you feel comfortable to run your department, but, maybe with smaller things and kind of building up your confidence in them, I think is important.
Perfect. Andrew and Shane, would you like to chime into the question?
Yeah, sure. I think it also depends on, Andrew kind of touched on it earlier about the 10% and the 90%. You have to have dependability and know who you can depend on. When read your team, know who can do what. I'm not going to throw somebody out there that has no clue what to do on a nature tour. I'm going to make sure I have the right team in place. If I know I can step back and really see that they've owned it, then I don't always need to hold their hand. It does take a few times at the very beginning, and it is kind of hard to say, okay, they don't always need me on this event, or I can start focusing on other things because they're the professional in this environment, not me. So kind of letting them feel like they are the sole person for that role, it kind of motivates them and makes them feel special, which they are. We hire them for their experience and their education a lot of times, and if they have that confidence that they can do something without a leader, I'm going to give that to them every single time. And know who you can rely on and who you can depend on.
Wonderful. Yes. Andrew, I noticed you unmuted, so if you'd like to chime in, please go ahead.
I mean, I was just going to touch on what Lauren talked about was training. Like, if you have a good training regimen in place, like as soon as associates come in and they're going through a training program, uh, they are going to be ready. And then you always step back and you can witness them and watch them do what they're going to do within that and give them feedback, because that's very important too. Like, you want to let them, don't want to hover over them, and you want to give them their ability to own that situation. But just like when I was building the activities entertainment team, we have people that are on the microphone that have never been on a microphone. You train them up to a certain standard, but the first time they get on a mic in front of everybody is going to be a completely different thing than when we were practicing with nobody on the pool deck. So having that ability, being like, okay, you've practiced, you've rehearsed, you know what to do. Now I'm going to let you go do it, but I'm going to be over here and I'll give you feedback afterwards on how we can make this better. So showing the support for them, but letting them, once again, it comes back to letting them fail a little bit. I didn't learn on the microphone until I had an absolute brain fart. Sorry, excuse me, but I got on the microphone. When I was working for Royal Caribbean, I got on and I was like, I was announcing my team, and I got to a point I didn't know the person's name. I just completely blanked on it and was standing there in front of a couple hundred people with nothing to say. And that failure led me to being better on the microphone and learning and exploring that a little bit more. So as a leader, you got to let them fail a little bit too.
Oh yeah, awesome. And thank you very much for sharing that story, Andrew. I think that is so important. Now, Lisa and Sally, thank you very much for calling into the hotline. Would anyone else like to call on in before we shift to close? Going once, going twice. Well, Shane, Lauren, and Andrew, thank you all very much for your insights and time today. It was such a pleasure to have you all as guest speakers on today's hotline. I think listeners and those that will listen later on the recording will be able to gain so much from the perspectives that you all brought to the table. So if no one has any other questions, we will be closing out now. So thank you all for joining. It is such a pleasure to host each and every month, giving everyone in recreation the opportunity to connect. Lisa, go ahead. Yes.
Just want to say thanks, Frank, for sharing your fam trip flyer. I'm going to read through it because it looks listen, apologize, solve, thanks. So it looks good.
That's from the pirate.
Oh,
The four
amazing.
parts.
Okay.
Yeah. That reminding their staff over there what to do and how to do it.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Frank, for
That's really
sharing that
cool.
in the chat here. Awesome. Well, alrighty, everyone. We are going to head off now. So thank you very much once again. If you have any questions, you don't have to just wait till next month's hotline. Please feel free to reach out to any one of the board of directors, as we're all super excited to give back to the RecNet community at large. So thank you all, and I hope you all have a wonderful week.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Justin.
everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers. Have a good one.